All right, we're going to continue talking about the Cold War and especially the containment that the Western Bloc in the United States was trying to engage in, trying to keep communism from spreading. So here we have the division among the communist totalitarian countries and the democratic capitalist countries. And the United States does not want communism to spread anymore. They do not want any more countries becoming red countries. First country we'll talk about is Germany. After World War II, the Allies divided Germany up into several different territories. The U.S., France, and Britain got part of it, half of it, and that became democratic and capitalist. And then East Germany was ruled by the USSR and then became communist totalitarian. But the problem is the capital city of Germany was Berlin, and they also divided the capital city up. So the west side of it was controlled by France, Britain, and the U.S., and then the east side of Berlin was controlled by the USSR. So there's this little section of Berlin, the city, that was controlled by the Western Bloc. The USSR wanted complete control of that. So what they did was they blockaded Berlin. They surrounded the city and cut it off from the U.S., France, and Britain. They didn't allow anybody to come in or go out. They also built the Berlin Wall between West and East Berlin as well to keep people from moving. And so the only way that the West Berlin was able to survive was that the U.S. actually flew in supplies so that they water, coal for heat, food, so that they could keep on living, but they were not allowed to leave West Berlin for several years. And so this sort of intensified the conflict between the Eastern and Western blocs. You also have conflict in Korea. North Korea was taken from Japan after World War II. The Allies couldn't figure out what to do with it, so they split it in two. The North became communist totalitarian, the South became democratic capitalist. And eventually, the North Korea decides that they want to attack and conquer South Korea and unite the country again to be communist and totalitarian. So North Korea comes down, attacks South Korea. Well, according to the Truman Doctrine, the U.S. is going to come help South Korea. So the U.S. comes and helps the South. They come in and push the North Koreans back and almost take over all of North Korea. Then China comes in, helps North Korea, and there's sort of a stalemate after that. So they decide to stay split in Korea. So the North continues to be communist, and the South continues to be capitalist democratic. In Vietnam, something very similar to North Korea happened. The North, after Japan lost its control of Vietnam, the North became a communist country ruled by Ho Chi Minh, who had a lot of support of his people. And the South became democratic and capitalist, ruled by Ngo Dinh Diem, who was not very popular. And he was not very popular because he basically did whatever the United States told him, and he persecuted a lot of Buddhists, which were in Vietnam. And here you can actually see one Buddhist monk who actually self-immolated himself, called himself on fire in protest. So Ho Chi Minh wants to unite the country again. He envisioned a united Vietnam, and he actually had a lot of support for this, even in South Vietnam. So he attacks the South and tries to take over uniting the country. Well, again, according to the Truman Doctrine, the U.S. comes to help the South. So we send troops into Vietnam, and we engage in a long battle of guerrilla warfare. Ho Chi Minh and his Viet Cong troops were using guerrilla warfare, was using random, quick surprise attacks and then escaping very quickly before the U.S. has time to regroup and go attack them. And they were pretty successful in this, so much so that the U.S. eventually leaves the war and the South is conquered by the North. Also in Afghanistan, the USSR is going to try to take control of Afghanistan and spread communism. Well, the U.S. doesn't want that to happen, so the U.S. provides the Muslims in Afghanistan supplies and training to resist the Soviets. And this works well. They are able to resist, and the Soviets are not able to take over Afghanistan. But afterwards, the U.S., since we had sent them supplies and trained them, we wanted to be able to exert influence over them. And after that, after we did that, the Afghanis didn't want us to control them at all. So Osama bin Laden, who was somebody who fought against the Soviets, who we trained, is going to lead resistance against the United States, which is kind of one of the big causes of the United States being still in Afghanistan today. Latin America was also, communism was becoming very popular in Latin America. It was not industrialized. They had cheap export of raw materials, and a lot of people were poor because of this. And one of the big things that the U.S. wanted, the U.S. was very involved in Latin America because we had lots of companies that were getting these raw materials for very cheap that we could use in the United States. But because of this poverty, communism started to spread, and because of the U.S. involvement, more people were turning to dictators to try to get rid of the United States influence. And so socialism and dictators become widespread, and many resist U.S. control and involvement in the region. In Cuba, the U.S. was a protectorate, Cuba was a protectorate of the U.S. under the Batista dictatorship. And the U.S. involvement while we were in there helped the wealthy, but it hurt the lower classes. And so a guy named Fidel Castro comes in and wants to take over, starting the Cuban Revolution, where he wanted to overthrow the Batista dictatorship and start a communist country. Now, when he does this, he is successful. Fidel Castro takes over in the Cuban Revolution. The Batista dictatorship is thrown out. Well, the U.S. isn't very happy about this, especially having a communist country so close to the United States. So we train a bunch of Cuban exiles, people that are sent out of Cuba by Fidel Castro, to go try to overthrow him. But this is stopped in the incident known as the Bay of Pigs. As soon as they got into Cuba, they were found and killed. And so eventually Cuba's mad because the United States is trying to kill Fidel Castro. And so they go to the USSR and make an alliance with them. And the USSR sends nuclear missiles to Cuba, and which could hit a lot of major United States cities. So the U.S. finds out about this because we see these missiles with satellite images. And because basically the United States and the USSR threatened to launch these missiles at each other, which would have resulted in mutually assured destruction. Both countries would have been destroyed. And eventually the missiles are removed from Cuba as long as the United States promised to leave Cuba alone, which is to this day still why Cuba and the United States do not trade. And so that is the containment in the Cold War.